Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Law and Money and You. I'm Roberta Saphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts. And
Hi, and I'm Camille Barron, a financial coordinator and healthcare advisor, also in Sharon, Massachusetts. And Roberta, today, by great demand, we have a return visitor who has probably been here more than any other guest and also happens to be the chair of the Law and Money and You Advisory Board.
yes, and this is our 12th year, unless it's the 13th. But Emily keeps looking more and more like a teenager.
She's getting younger instead of older.
And she takes on more and more and more and more and more and more and more. I'm going to tell us a little bit about yourself, Emily.
Great to see you guys. And yes, I did start counting backwards after my 50th birthday. So maybe that's what's going on.
And we'll try it.
It's the power of positive thinking. No, it's great to be here. So tell us a little bit about, so I'm an attorney here in Sharon. We have an office in Sharon and also an office out in Western Massachusetts. We do primarily employment law and estate planning. And I currently serve on the Sharon Select Board and previously on the Sharon School Committee. That's
yes, and if there were more things and you had more time, they would want you to run for more. But one of the things, if people go to your site, is they see, and we're very big in financial planning and bringing that to the high schools, Brighten Up clubs of this, but you have something like that on your website. How about going into that? Although Camille had 50,000 questions first.
Go ahead first, that's all right.
So we have a lot on our website. Are you talking about the estate planning content?
Yeah, the financial points. And I mean, it's so concise, and I've really never seen it like that before, where it's so good.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we do on the estate planning side is, people have a lot of misconceptions about this. Sometimes people feel like they don't have enough money or assets to have to worry about it. That's really untrue. There's a lot that planning can do to make life easier for your family, even if you don't have, a huge estate. I think the other point you may be thinking about, Roberta, that we try to explain to people is most people in Massachusetts are richer than they think. The estate tax in Massachusetts kicks in at $1 million, which sounds like an awful lot of money, but it includes things like your retirement savings, your house, even though it passes out of probate, your life insurance proceeds. I would say most families in Sharon are probably knocking at that door more than they think.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's what you were thinking about, Roberta, but that's one of the try to cross.
Somebody's trying to contact me and I'm telling them to go away. Yeah, no, it's pretty much that's it. But I think one of the things I want to go on, actually, I like what Camille had set out about people going back to the workplace after COVID. Camille, you ask it.
Yes. So Emily, we've been, kind of stuck in our homes for a very long time. And now that things have kind of opened up a little, more and more businesses are considering or have already decided to go back into the office. And that has a lot of implications for employees who, for one reason or another, are not prepared to do that.
Right.
It may be because they still have issues with childcare, or they may not feel totally comfortable because maybe someone at home is immunocompromised. Or I even heard of one case where an employee was hired a couple of years ago with the understanding that the job would be fully remote. And it wasn't to end when COVID was under control. And so this person was really kind of having a tough time with expecting that she would be working at home, and now is expected to go back into the office. So wondering if you've run into any of these situations, or even if you haven't, what kind of thoughts might you have that could help people to navigate through this?
Yeah, no question. We've run into all of them, both as attorneys advising both employers and employees, and also as a business, because we've had to make some decisions ourselves about remote and how we're going to manage that. So, beyond the legal, which I'll bore you with in a minute, the practical realities are exactly as you said. I mean, there are people who have been in jobs where they've never been anything but remote. And there are people who used to be in person and maybe just didn't understand the logistical load they were carrying with a commute until we had a couple of years of not having that.
Right.
And, coupled with the fact that for most industries, we've learned that it's really possible. It used to be kind of a perk, a work from home if you earn it. And now it's sort of normal for people. So it's hard, very hard from a personal perspective.
I just want to say something. You put it on the head. No matter what they agree to in the beginning, it's become normal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if maybe that was just in the mind of the person who you knew, or
Right.
it doesn't matter. It's becoming normal. But what's happening too, I don't know if running into it, is that people are not working out there. And now they're saying, well, they are working. They're just looking for a job that they can work from home. But even like we're in Massachusetts, everybody's looking for help. Arizona, they have billboards looking for help.
Yeah, it's fascinating because that is true. It's a really weird labor market. And I think people, when you think about it, work is trading time for money. And I think employees have gotten a little choosier about what they're willing to trade for, what bargain they're willing to strike. At the same time, it hasn't stopped. We're still seeing termination cases. We're still seeing, employers are still letting people go. So it's not entirely a seller's market in that regard. But yeah, I mean, legally, you can change the terms of employment. I can hire you as a remote employee and then say starting next month, it's different and it's an at-will employment state. So you can, the legal answer is kind of take it or leave it. But there are exceptions. I mean, what's interesting is for people with a disability or people who have something else that needs to be accommodated, the analysis has always been what's a reasonable accommodation. It didn't used to be that working from home or telecommuting was obviously a reasonable accommodation for somebody who needed it. But now that it's, to your point, Roberta, now that it's become normal, I think that that's very much in play. For example, if you are immunocompromised and you ask for an accommodation and your job is a job that can be done remotely, 5 years ago, a court might not have found that was a reasonable accommodation that the employer had to make. Today, I'm not so sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes up in the vaccine realm too. If people have, a bona fide medical or religious objection and they want to be accommodated and they could do their job from home, that's not been litigated, that's not been decided, but I can see that as sort of the next wave of reasonable accommodation claims.
Well, you bring up something equally as important as the returning to work versus not returning to the office, but the whole idea of vaccine resistance. It's been in the news many times where companies or public services have required people to be vaccinated, and some employees have resisted getting vaccinated for whatever reason, and saying that the employer can't require them to get vaccinated. They should be able to choose. What are your thoughts about that? I'm sure that's very real, even more than returning to the office. Any ideas of what you've seen or what you think about that in terms of the employee's rights?
As a business owner, I'm lucky in that all of my team wanted to get vaccinated. So we haven't had to deal with that problem, but we get calls about it every day. And the reality is an employer can do this. An employer can require you to be vaccinated for COVID, for chickenpox, for, anything else, unless you have a legally protected reason not to take the vaccine. And that would be a medical reason where you've got a doctor who's going to stand behind saying there's a medical reason you shouldn't have the vaccine, or a religious objection. And the thing that people don't understand really well about the religious objection is you don't have an unqualified right to say it's against my religion, I don't have to do it. What you have a right to do is to say, I've got a sincerely held religious belief and I need an accommodation.
Mm.
So, you know, the example I kind of like to use is if you're writing software code from your living room and you never see a soul a day in your life, it might be a reasonable accommodation to let you keep doing that and not make you get the vaccine. If you are a frontline healthcare worker, if you know, are in proximate contact with customers or other coworkers, and you can't do your job from home, there might be no obligation on the employer at all to accommodate.
So now let's combine these two issues. Suppose you have an employer who requires people to get vaccinated. Well, let me say it this way. Suppose you have an employer that encourages people to be vaccinated, but doesn't require it. And let's say you have some people in the office who don't. What about the employee now who has been working at home, who doesn't want to go back to the office because they feel that it's not safe because they're around people who haven't been vaccinated?
Yeah, it's a great question. And
It's a real question too.
it's a real question. And I think there's two answers to it. I think the legal answer is it falls right back into the bucket of who's got a right to request accommodations, right? If I just don't feel safe, but I'm a perfectly healthy human being, I may not have anywhere I can go with that except for to look for a different job, or one that allows me to stay remote, or one that requires my coworkers to get vaccinated. The practical answer, though, and this is what I think employers are struggling with and need to struggle with, is the market is different for exactly that reason. I mean, at-will employment cuts both ways. You can be fired for any reason, but you can walk out the door for any reason too. And I think particularly in professional services, or in, you know, the kinds of services that are not face-to-face, I think on the labor side, the market's really demanding that kind of consideration.
Yeah. And, you know, another related issue is an employment situation where employees are not required but encouraged to wear masks when COVID is high in that area. So you have people who may not want to be around people who are unmasked. It's probably the same logic that you just described, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. It makes things very confusing though, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And I can say we are still largely remote. You know, in part because it just simplifies these issues while everybody gets used to what the new normal is. And in part because, you know, I have team members who've never worked in the office. This has been going on for 2 years, you know?
Yeah.
In a way that's good, because you don't have to make an office for them, and you don't have to do other things for them. But in another way, you don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, there's a little risk with that, I suppose.
I would argue, and maybe I just think differently than some people, but I think for those businesses that were able to be successful remotely during the pandemic, I think it's because they were basically good at management in the first place, or learned how to up their game in that, because you have to have different ways to figure out who's active and who's not.
Right.
And you know, I will say, just it's hurtful that people don't want to come back in person. I think the most common thing that I hear is people want to keep a part of that remote for convenience and for the time that it saves. But a lot of people, even who want to mostly still work remote, still miss being in the office and seeing other people, and being able to collaborate and communicate with their coworkers. So
that's right. Yes. There is that social interaction that you don't get when you're working remotely. That's true.
But some jobs, like if you live in a town and you have to work in the city, the commute is like an hour each way. And if they can remote from home, that's an extra 2 hours or more a day, plus the
True.
costs and everything.
Yeah.
Mm.
How do they, how are some issues there? Well, you're an attorney. How is it in the courts now?
It'll be interesting. Right now, most of the court appearances are still virtual. Trials
Really?
are live, but for us, most of trials are relatively rare. So most of our court appearances are motion hearings or scheduling conferences, which are all still virtual. And I hope they stay that way. It saves our clients a ton of money for me to not have to drive into Boston, billing by the hour, pay for parking, and have a 10-minute conversation with a judge.
Mm.
Trials, of course, are a different story. You've got juries, you've got, it remains to be seen to keep some of those new innovations in the court system. I know there was a poll that went out to all practicing attorneys to sort of survey the opinions about, should we go back to full in person? Should we double down on the remote? Somewhere in between. So I'm waiting to see what the outcome of that is.
I would imagine now, more back to employment, that because of the, where we are in terms of unemployment, it's low. The employees, generally speaking, have more clout in these circumstances, I would think, because companies are trying to hire people and they can't fill the positions. So right now, I think it works more to the employee's favor because they can ask for more, they can require more, but that could change, right?
Yeah.
It could change, and maybe it will.
Yeah. And it's also not universal. It's either not universal or I can't explain this disconnect, right? That there's a market in which employers are desperate to find good people. And yet I don't think we're seeing any fewer calls into our office from people being terminated than we used
to.
Yeah.
Really? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wonder why. Any idea?
I think it's just a thing that happens all the time, right? If from the employer's perspective, if somebody's not a good fit, you got to do what you got to do but we also, the same old things keep happening that have always happened as long as time. There is still discrimination. There is still retaliation. There are still, troubled waters that people get into.
No matter what the economy is or what else is going on at the time around them, right?
Yeah, the other thing that we're seeing a lot of, and hopefully this is a wave that goes away, but because the system was so confused at the beginning of the pandemic and nobody really fully understood how the pandemic unemployment worked, people are now getting overpayment notices from the DUA saying, we don't think you should have received that money, so kindly pay back $35,000.
Oh, my goodness. I mean,
how are they going to get it back?
How are they going to get it back, really?
Well, the thing is about the state is it's not your average creditor. They have the ability to intercept your tax refunds. They have the ability to, count that against future unemployment. They have a lot more ability to collect that money than your average person that you owe money to. So it's a big deal.
Yeah.
I
read recently that there was something I read saying that they were going to lighten up on trying to get all of that back. So I'm not sure exactly what they meant, but
yeah. So about 2-3 weeks ago, Governor Baker said that they were going to stop doing the tax intercepts because that was beginning at the beginning of the year as people start filing their taxes and waiting for their refunds. They're sending out intercept notices saying we're going to intercept your refund because you still owe us this money. So Governor Baker announced that they weren't going to do that at least this year. But the notices keep going out. And, what people should know about that is if you get an overpayment notice, you should immediately request an appeal of the decision that you were not eligible because there's 2 ways you can push back on that notice. You can fight about the determination. if you lose that fight, you can also request a waiver of the overpayment where you show them that it was not your fault, you didn't commit fraud on the DUA, and that it's a financial hardship. But
Interesting.
if you don't to challenge the eligibility decision, you may lose your appeal rights. So sometimes people are confused and they think they're appealing by requesting a waiver, and then time goes by and they didn't ask for an appeal hearing.
Oh.
And
You know what's come up too on this, what people are doing, and I know this isn't your field, but I'd like to hear what you think of it, because I'm sure when you walk into a room, the first thing that goes in your mind, in the back of your mind, is legal. What's the law on this, the law on that? But lately, there was a matter where a fellow bought some property and he sealed off the bottom floor, and he went away on vacation, you know, figuring, oh, I'm going to redo the whole building and put up other buildings on this big lot of land. And he comes back and finds somebody squatting, and this person was given the right in a local court to squat there. I mean, in the end, police had to come and carry her out under court order because the woman wouldn't move. But there are no squatter. I mean, for people that are running into that, there are no squatters' rights in Massachusetts. Oh, and then bringing up another topic, which you might have too, more on employment, I would think, that people read up on it on the internet. And what happens is they find these quote laws from other states and they go, oh, I can do it here. And they become their own lawyer. So the thing is, who was it, Abraham Lincoln, that they said, he said, why are you charging so much for this? You had 10 minutes of time. He says, no, it's for the 25 years of research and practice that went in behind that. But I mean, have you heard of anything coming up like that?
so I don't know about the squatters' rights things. I mean, I know landlord-tenant law is
Oh, that's
a
another
series of
thing.
landmines, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of people representing themselves, yeah, it's you're allowed to do it, right? If you have a case you want to bring and you can't find a lawyer, you're allowed to do it.
Yeah,
It's almost
okay.
never a good idea. Because as you said, Roberta, there's, you know, knowing even what law applies to know what you're reading on Google is important.
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to these people is, what law school did you go to?
Right.
On the other hand, you know, so you guys know I spend a day a week out in the hill towns of Western Mass, that we have a satellite office out there. And it's a very different environment than Sharon. It's, you know, this collection of 22, 23 small towns. There are no other attorneys there.
From all
Really?
of those towns, are you serious?
Yep. I mean, if they are there, they've kept themselves well hidden. Let me just put it that way, because I can't. But what that means is that the people who need their services can't find them either. And there's only so many kinds of law that I do, and it doesn't match everybody's needs. You know, I'm sort of running around madly trying to create referral relationships in the nearby cities. So at least I can say, you can go to this person I trust. But the reason for that long shaggy dog story was to say, sometimes people represent themselves because they don't have easy access to legal services.
That's interesting too. But and then speaking of Chester, that's a little town. You've been going there for a while. I mean, that's something like the way Sharon was. I picture it like the people traveling out west to make new settlements. I think it's fascinating. Yeah. How far is it on a ride from Sharon?
It's about 2 hours. It's not that bad.
Oh, it is 2 hours.
Yep. Yeah. Chester itself, I think, is 1,200 in population. And that's why they sort of refer to that area as the hill towns, because there's a bunch of towns that are about that size each.
Is it part of the Berkshires?
Oh, excuse me, go ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah.
part of the Berkshires?
So it's right before you get to the Berkshires. Chester is the last town before Berkshire County begins.
Worcester, Worcester, isn't it?
Berkshire County starts in Beckett and goes out to like Pittsfield, Lee, Lennox,
No,
Stockbridge.
but isn't Chester in Worcester County or?
No,
that's
Chester's
on
in
there?
Hampden County.
What county?
Hampden? It's the county that Springfield is the center of. So out in that corner,
Oh.
there's Hampshire County, which is Northampton, and Byron's Hamden, which is Springfield-ish, and then Berkshire County, which takes you up.
So what is Chester, Hampden County?
Chester is Hampden.
Mhm.
It's the last
Oh,
county in Hampden. So this area used to be, Route 20 goes through there. That used to be the primary way people got from Springfield out to Lee, Lennox, etc. And in the 50s, when they built the Mass Pike, all of that kind of stopped.
Hmm.
So it used to actually be a pretty vibrant town and set of towns along that major thoroughfare.
Yeah.
Now is a little bit more economically forgotten.
Oh.
But that's changing.
mm.
If the East-West Rail ever gets built, there may be a train station in Chester.
I was watching a thing on trains last night, like the steamship. Meanwhile, that's bad for the environment. The steam, it was all black spot.
Mhm.
So what are they running the trains on now? You think they're going to run them on solar?
I have no idea. I don't know. I know there's some part of the Amtrak infrastructure has some electric, like between New Haven and New York. I don't know. We're getting way out of my expertise here.
Yeah, you really, you have a narrow expertise. However, it encompasses so many different things. With employment and so many different things, especially today, discrimination. You have, you got the reverse discrimination too. If you're a white male, I remember 10 years ago, there was this white male out in his 50s, and they said 20 years from now, there won't be any white males. It's all but it's like a reverse discrimination.
True.
Those are tough, right? Those are tough discrimination is on its face applicable to everybody, right? Protected class is gender. It shouldn't matter if you're male or female. The interesting thing though, I was in a room of about 40 people one day before the pandemic. I was doing a presentation and I asked people to raise their hands if they belong to any of the protected classes. And we went through them one by one. At the end of that exercise, there was one person in the room that wasn't a member of a protected class.
And
you think about age and disability and,
and what were they?
They were a young white guy, perfectly healthy, heterosexual, But my point being, almost everybody's in one of those classes when you really get down to the nitty gritty.
That's interesting. I've seen this with the students. We got a lot of students that are intern team members, and sometimes they come with me and say, "Oh, this teacher gave me this and this and that, and he wouldn't do that." And it was a black teacher. I said, well, maybe he don't like you because you're Jewish. I said, you could holler reverse discrimination. So in other words, they're looking for something. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she just deserved that. But maybe there is something, and maybe there isn't. And anyway, the matter got settled. But it's interesting. What comes to your mind is this discrimination, one way or the other. And then we're getting near the end. But another thing that seems to come up with, and I bet it comes up with your employment. You have it, I want it. You don't need all that, so give it to me. And I'm wondering if that probably comes up with the employment law too, a lot.
You mean in terms of like how people are paid or whether they got stiffed out of a promotion? Yeah, look, jealousy is a human condition.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Very interesting. We always have interesting talks with you and with the wonderful questions that Camille got.
I remember I was on flying on a long flight. I think I was going to Chicago or something, and this was not too long after the war in Iraq.
Mm.
and Afghanistan. So he was on leave, and I asked him a lot of questions because I was just really interested in what it was really like to be there. And after about 10 questions, he says, "Are you a reporter for CNN or something?"
Well, that's funny.
asked
But
somebody-
on that note, we have to leave. We're
Okay,
Almost, we got about 10 seconds.
all right. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. It's always
Yes,
interesting.
thank
We
you.
always learn from you. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. We have many, many guests who are available, and many of them return like Emily has. If you have any questions or you have any thoughts about another topic or something you'd like to learn more about, please let us know. Because remember, this is your show, the law, your money, and you.
And you. Thank you all.
Thank you both. Good to see you.